Friday the 13th Part 7 The New Blood was directed by John Carl Buechler, who sadly passed away in 2019. Buechler had a long career as an effects artist, working on films such as Hatchet, From Beyond, Reanimator, and Ghoulies Go to College, just to name a few. Name an 80s horror movie and chances are he worked on it in some capacity. When he was approached to direct Part 7, his initial reaction was,
"Why? Didn't they just make 6 of them?"
But given his effects background, he wanted to approach this as more of a stunt movie than a gore-driven film. And that's what sets this apart from the other movies, because this is where the MPAA really started to come down hard. Buechler himself is famously quoted as saying,
"Ratings board raped my movie."
He's not lying, a lot of the kills in this seem tame compared to something like Final Chapter, but I'm going to be honest, given what I've seen from low-quality deleted footage, a lot of the makeup didn't look all that convincing. Things like Ben's skull being crushed and the original makeup for Tina's dad as he jumps out of the lake look kind of hokey, and I don't think they would have done much better in selling the film. Actually, what makes the movie work for me is Jason's appearance. If you're watching this video, you know that this is the first appearance of Kane Hodder as Jason. Hodder adds a lot of personality to the character, like his signature heavy breathing and his specific body language, things like when he moves his head before the rest of his body. The performance is commendable, but what sells it for me is his overall aesthetic. This is the first one where you see part of his face behind the mask for the entire movie. It makes you wonder, more than any time before, what is hiding behind that mask? We've seen Jason's face in every movie before this, but this is where having the makeup look different every time comes in handy. What's he going to look like this time? I'll get to that in a minute, but when we get our first glimpse of Jason, he's pretty rough. Part of his spine is showing through his skin, he's still got those chains around his neck, and he's a pretty imposing presence. This is the first time where Jason has some bulk to him, and normally I don't like how big they make him in later films, but here, there's an added layer of menace. The kills are weak sauce, but when Jason's stalking after one of the characters, it's pretty unsettling. This is the version of Jason that would make me piss myself if I came across him in the woods. And normally I disagree with the notion that Jason doesn't run. If something this big suddenly started running after me, I think my puberty would fall from my asshole and I'd shriek like a little girl. The way he slowly chases after his victims adds to the suspense and makes up for the lack of gore. The movie feels more violent than it actually is because of how Jason is portrayed, if that makes sense. Then they reveal Jason's face, and it's not great. He's actually pretty laughable. Some of the articulation is pretty cool, but that also hurts the character. I don't like thinking of Jason as someone who needs to emote. And he's pretty much unmasked for the last 20 minutes of the movie. As much as I love the overall look of Jason, seeing him unmasked almost ruins it. Like with most things, less is usually more. As far as the stunt work, that's the other thing that makes the lack of gore more forgivable. Because this film adds more of a fantasy element, we get to see things that aren't typical for a Friday the 13th flick. The final girl is Tina, played by Lar Park Lincoln. I had a crush on Lar back in the early 90s. She didn't share my affection. Tina has telekinetic abilities that makes her an even match for Jason, so she can set things on fire or make objects fly across a room with her mind. It makes for an entertaining chase sequence. There's also a ridiculous explosion, but it's the best explosion ever, in any movie. I mean that. The explosion was so ridiculous that apparently they had a hard time piecing together the sequence because on the day of filming, the longest piece of film that survived was about 12 frames. That's less than a second of screen time. That's insane. When it comes to these movies, there's not much to talk about in the way of characters, but this is one of those movies that defines the term disposable. You've got the high school sweetheart, the film geek, the rich blonde bitch, the stoner, the ugly duckling, the promiscuous girl, the gay guy playing a straight guy, the lesbian playing a lesbian, and the evil doctor who you just know is going to die a glorious death. The Weekend at Bernie's guy. I mean, his death is nothing great, and it's just one more scene that pretty much got cut entirely, but it at least had potential to be a standout kill, and it's not a great way to go by any stretch. It's an entertaining movie, a little sloppy in its execution, no pun intended, but for a movie with the words Part 7 in its title, it's better than you might think. But seriously, Jason versus Telekinetic Girl? What's next? Huh, they might as well send Jason to New York. Wait, what? Are you freaking kidding me?